Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our quilt project.
I'm super excited about it.
And this is Jenny. Hi Jenny.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us and painting this quilt. You
I'm
know
really
a little
excited
something
about
about them.
I do. So I'm Jenny Doan from the Missouri Star Quilt Company, and I actually took up watercolor as a way to boost my creativity a few years ago.
Yeah, about 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I painted regularly with Sarah for a long time.
Every week.
And then I actually, somehow something happened. I got out of the habit, so I haven't painted in like a year. When I saw she was going to paint this, I'm like, please let me come back on. I need the rejuvenation.
She's like, you want a painting buddy? And I'm like, always.
I'm like, can I come and paint with you?
Always a good idea. So we're so excited to have you, and we have Keenan working the cameras.
Hello.
Of course.
And we are going to be doing this project in 5 steps. So our very first step is we will be putting in the shadows on our white quilt. Our second step is we will be putting in our big stars. Our third step is we will be painting kind of that edge on our quilt. Fourth step, the smaller stars. And the very last step, just finishing details, anything that you need to kind of
so excited about
tighten up this painting. We are using 4 colors in this.
The colors?
Let me get a scratch paper
There.
so I can swatch them. So our very first color here is Dandelion Yellow, which is a very bright, happy yellow. Our second color here is Sepia. Our third...
Is that how you say that? Sepia?
No, I'm pretty sure it's Sepia.
Oh, I liked it.
I
It
feel
felt
like-
kind of European.
I feel like Sepia just sounds better.
Sepia.
But I'm
I
pretty
like
sure
it.
it's wrong.
It does sound good. It does.
It does sound good.
I like it better than Sepia.
Yeah, I do too.
All right, and our last color,
I'm in. Good.
or our third color is red. And our last color is pine green. So what's interesting, I think, about this palette is we'll be using water to lighten our values, to shift the hues to kind of more pastels and neutrals instead of these like very strong colors. And we are using 4 paintbrushes in this project.
Yes, we are.
So we have a round 2, a round 6, a round 12, and a wash 1-inch brush.
Nice.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
And this is based on a quilt I did called Dashing Stars.
Yep.
And we're actually working on a triple play for this.
That's
Same
perfect.
pattern. Yeah, it's very exciting. I don't know when they come out, but wouldn't it be cool if they actually came out on the same
That
day?
would be so cool. This comes out in August. So
Okay, I
maybe.
think mine is like, I think it might be September.
Oh, okay. You guys are
We can link back.
working a little bit more ahead than we are, I
That
guess.
seems quick. That's smart. You know what? Good call.
I was gone for a while, so I'm trying really hard to catch up.
Okay, so before we get to painting, now Jenny and I already transferred our outlines onto our paper, but there are directions in your subscription box on how to do that if you need any help. And let's do our oath and then get into painting.
Let's do it.
So if you can raise your right hand and repeat after me, I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun. Amen.
Thank you. Amen. And I love starting that way because we have to remember that when we take time to create, it's just for us to create. It's not about being the best or better. It's not about tearing ourselves down or holding ourselves up to really unrealistic expectations. It's just about finding joy. And that's what we're here for.
It truly is. It truly is.
Okay.
I love that.
So when we start on this, we're gonna put on our shadow first. So if you look at our quilt, the background of it is white. Now you guys can add a background color if you want, but what I'm trying to really communicate here is that this quilt is kind of folding. It has that kind of fabric element. And if you guys ever wanna study values, which is the lightness and darkness of a color, painting white fabric is like excellent practice in that because it shows you all the different folds and how the shadows and values transition and adjust to communicate the overall shape of that piece of fabric. So, but I thought that just by doing kind of more of a simple is a great intro for that, and then you guys can go off with that whenever you want to. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take my round 12 and I'm gonna mix like a neutral color. So I'm gonna start with, well, my red mixed in with my sepia, but that's okay. I'm gonna start with some red and sepia and put in a little bit of green, and that automatically is gonna kind of make this gray brown color. And I wanna kind of cool it off a little bit more, so I'm gonna do more of this green. And just kind of little by little add more color until you get a mixture that's pretty kind of grayish brown. And then I'm gonna add some water to that and pull it off to the side. So now I have this kind of light gray value. You see that? So now I have that color on my brush, and we're gonna start with the shadows right on this side. Now, if you look at your outline here, you'll notice that I do hash marks on areas that are a darker value. So we have a darker value line here and a darker value edge here. And we're just gonna kind of eyeball it, okay?
That's super helpful.
So I'm gonna take this light value and just on the right or the left-hand side of this line, start putting that in.
But not where the stars are.
You can go over the stars.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can go ahead and paint the stars because, and that's a great question because the fabric itself is moving, not just the white parts, right? So those sections on our stars are gonna be a darker value on the shadowed area than the ones in the highlighted area. So you can take that shadow all the way down if you want.
So this shadow will actually help you when you get to the star part?
Yep,
Nice.
It's gonna inform you of the value of your stars. And then what I like to do, so I have like this pretty chunky section. I've been saying chunky a lot.
Chunky's been the word of the
Chunky.
of the week for
I like it.
A chunky section. And then what I like to do is I like to take just water and, no, you're okay.
I went beyond my line.
That's okay. You can just rip a piece of paper towel. And
I just wipe my finger across it.
I do that.
Just lick it a little. You're gonna be fine, Jenny. You're gonna be fine.
So it's perfect.
And then I just like to kind of blend out that edge so it's kind of a smoother transition.
Okay.
Now, right now you're probably looking at this, and if you feel like your shadow is a little bit dark, do not stress. I'm telling you, it's gonna be okay, because as we add more colors and values, we don't want that value to disappear, so it's okay for it to be a little bit dark. Perfect. Okay.
Got it perfect. From Sarah Gray. It's my best day.
Today's a good day to paint, right?
Today is a good day.
Okay, and then I'm gonna do the second section of my shadow, and it's essentially just, I'm gonna eyeball it, but it's gonna go across here. So kind of like right in the middle of this big star and kind of over here between this big star. And we're gonna do the same thing, kind of put in that gray value, and then just use water to blend out the edges so it kind of transitions to the white.
On both sides?
On both sides, that's right. And so what we're trying to communicate here is that this fabric itself is going back in and then coming back out, just how blankets kind of fold and curve just like that.
Quilts always make me want to curl up in a ball and watch
read?
a movie.
Oh, movie. A movie.
A movie. I just want to, like, maybe
Probably one of the
sappy-
Marvel movies for Keenan.
You're right. You're right.
Probably the Minions.
The Minions. Sing.
Sing is actually a cute
I love
movie.
that one.
It's interesting when you're on an airplane flying for a long time, you generally watch movies, and I've found that I watch most of the movies, so I found myself watching cartoons. They were delightfully entertaining, actually, you know? I was like, huh.
They have great stories.
Yeah, they do. Like Encanto, I had never watched Encanto.
Oh, Encanto.
And I wanted to know why we don't talk about Bruno, so,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
My mom actually took them to see that movie, and they came back singing that song, and I was just like, what is happening?
They're like, I better,
And Luna's
better
like,
check
we
that
don't
out.
talk about Bruno.
We don't talk about Bruno.
We don't talk about it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, so that's feeling pretty good. So even already, just by putting the shadow in, you can kind of see a little bit of a dimensionality on our quilt, which I think is like really exciting and great. Now, we're gonna let that dry for a second before we move on to do our colors. Now, I just wanna give you guys permission and empower you to change these colors as you see fit. I wanted to do something that felt very kind of cozy and warm. So I went for more like the yellows and the oranges and the reds, but this is absolutely your quilt. You guys can,
It would be really fun to watercolor it like one you'd made.
yeah, absolutely.
Because these are basically Lemoyne stars. A lot of people do stars in the quilt world.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of crossover between, you know, if you're creative in one area, you're generally creative in some other area.
absolutely. And so I just want to give you guys permission to really just paint whatever you want. You can even do patterns on there that are patterns that are like maybe mean something to you. I just kind of kept it simple with some like dots and lines, but feel free to change this up. So after it's dry, what we're going to do is we are going to start painting the different sections of our stars. Now you can see here that I kind of did fabric or changed the color every other one. But you don't even have to do it that way. It doesn't have to be every other. It could be all the same. It could be every single one different. Give yourself permission to change it as you see fit. So I am going to start with this guy right here where I kind of use like red and like a pink color. So I'm gonna get some fresh red because my red bled with my sepia. I'll just turn that. Okay, so grab your 6 and I am going to take some of this red and add some water to it over here, which will make like a really pretty pink. And if you want to make it a peachy pink, you can grab some yellow and put that in there. Or you can just do plain pink, it's up to you. I'm gonna do a little mixture of both. Okay, and I'm just gonna paint these little sections. And I'm gonna do every other one.
Do the sections have names?
That would be a question for a quilter.
Well, they're actually made with half square triangles, or they're made with, you can also, if you want to hand do them, you can set them by hand, and they are called a rhombus.
Oh, okay.
But
I like that.
but rhombuses, you have to do the Y seam with the rhombus, so I tend to steer a little bit away from that and just use half square triangles.
Oh yeah, the Y seam.
The Y seam is.
Oh, I absolutely know what you're talking about when you say that.
You don't? You do? Or you don't?
I don't. My
So usually you just
experience-
sew a seam straight, and it's
Uh-huh.
where 3 seams come together. So you have to sew a little bit on this place, a little bit on that place, and a little bit on that place to get it all to connect. Because you can't just lay them together and sew. It's where 3 junctions.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
it's like a Y.
The Y seam.
The Y seam.
Now, one thing that was kind of fun when I was painting this that I noticed, and I always give myself a little bit of freedom to be a little bit wonky with my shapes because painting straight lines and clean edges is actually really, really hard. But what was fun is if you look at how these line up, this edge, if you were to continue this line, matches up with this edge, and this edge messages. So it was interesting because I'm like, oh, I'm sure that's how they create those patterns is they line up those edges to make those shapes. But it's just like a easy tool for you guys to use if you're like, wait, this should line up with here, this one should line up here, this one should line up here.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, you changed colors on me, so mine are different colors now.
That's okay, it's different fabric now.
Oh, is that what's...
Now so if you look at this, you can see that this right section on our star kind of goes in that shadowed area. So if you want to do like one more layer on that to give it a slightly darker value to match the movement of that quilt, then you can do that as well.
Jenny, when you were painting regularly, did you have a go-to painting that you like to do on repeat, or did you do different ones?
I did whatever Sarah was doing that week is what I did. And I have to tell you, you know, the whole pledge about being kind to yourself and all that, you know, we all say it, we all believe it, we don't all do it. And so I would look at that thing and I'd be like, that is just awful. And I'd finish it and I'd put it aside and I'd just think, oh, you should just stop, you know. And then I'd get up in the morning and I'd look at that picture and I'd go, you know what? That looks like a fish. You can tell it's a fish. And I was okay with it.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it was really hard. And but also, one of the things you can do if you ever get in a creative slump is to create out of your element. And so I try to take classes in lots of other things. And recently, we went and took a class down in Kansas City on making marbles, glass marbles.
What?
Like playing marbles?
Like playing marbles. And you start with beads. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever done, but I was so hard on myself. Like right in the middle of it, I'd be like, that looks terrible. Everybody's head would pop up and look at me and I'd be, like I'm doing really fine. But, you know, and it was really work for me because it was so, this, even though I don't paint, was more natural to me than doing that. You know, because you work with the fire and the hot, you're melting glass and you have to turn it, and you know it was a lot of really interesting work. And here's Ron over here, ooh, you know, and you know, and Natalie is really good with glass, you know, and I just felt like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? And then I was like, you know what? These people have been doing this for 40 some odd years, and I just need to give myself some grace. And
Absolutely.
so painting really helped me do that because I learned most of that lesson when I was painting, but forgot it. So I had to relearn it real quick.
It's easy to forget that lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just because we just kind of play that comparison game, and have these really high expectations for ourselves without recognizing experience, without recognizing practice, without
Right.
recognizing all of these things that go into it that we don't necessarily see. And we kind of have this expectation for ourselves like, well, I need to be just like that person because I'm a human and they're a human, but that's just not how it works. And unfortunately, that comparison game can steal that joy from us.
It can really rob your joy.
Yeah.
But the thing that's cool is that at the end of the day, I really did get better at painting. You know, and one Easter, I copied this little gnome, you know, on a whole bunch of cards, and I made Easter tags for my gifts, and and sent these little gnomes to everybody, and some of them were holding a little egg, and you know, and they weren't perfect, but the kids were like, Mom, you know, I was just like, I was so proud of myself. It was really that was really fun, and it was one of those things where normally I would never go out of the box and do it on my own, but I felt confident enough to do that, and it turned out really fun.
So I switched to a darker value for finishing off this star. Now you want to be a little bit careful because sometimes if like our sections are still wet and if we go up to that line, it will bleed. That's happening a little bit on this guy right here. You can see a little bit of that.
Mine's happening a little bit on this guy.
Yeah. And you can just let it go and say, you know what, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to stress. Or if that is bothering you, then you can just leave a really thin white line between the two sections to avoid those bleedings. Another option is you just start on another star totally to give those sections time to dry before you paint right next to it. So any and all options are correct. Now remember on the stars that are kind of caught in our quilt kind of shadow, you want those values to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to do an extra run on this one.
I feel like my colors aren't quite different enough.
And you can always do another layer too. That's the nice thing about watercolors. If you work a little bit with a light hand, you can always go back and do another layer on top. Okay, I'm just going to keep on keeping on. Now the theme for this month's box is called Small Comforts.
Oh.
And what I was trying to do is just think about what it is that we have in our lives that are just these small things that bring us joy or remind us of home or kind of that comfort element. I mean, last month we traveled the world. We did we went to Italy and France. We painted all of these really fun places, but sometimes there's nothing like just being home. And when I thought about home, my mom is a quilter, and I was just thinking through what are some simple things that just make me like being home. And one of them is being wrapped up in a quilt, either watching a show or reading a book.
Yes.
But I don't sew quilts personally, but I got a lot of people around me who do, and I get to benefit from it.
I feel like you're sewing a quilt by painting a quilt.
I like that thinking, and I appreciate it.
The paper quilt idea might
The
not
paper
be as
quilt.
comfy.
You don't want to curl up with a piece of paper?
No.
It says comfy to the eye.
Yes.
All right, I have lots of blooms on mine.
I actually think you can work that into a pattern.
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the pattern's going to be, but I'm okay. But I do feel like I need a little bit more contrast in my should I add some brown to it? Is that what I'm? Oh, that's your.
So if you want to do, you can see I have just like, I didn't go too specific with the patterns here on the fabric because one, that feels kind of like a lot of work, and two, I wanted it to be a little bit like loose. So I kind of just dropped in some blooms with a slightly darker value just to get like wet on wet.
Okay.
Just to get an uneven feel, because sometimes fabric kind of just has that where you're just like, I'm not entirely sure what marks these are, but I know that there's marks on them.
It just looks like this one has been washed without a color catcher.
What's a color catcher?
You know, color catchers, that's a laundry thing, and it's like it prevents, you know, like
Bleeding?
if you have a red, bleeding. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
I did not know that existed.
It exists.
Can you tell my husband does the laundry? Because
Ron too. So now that, you know, I'm doing this all the time, he does the laundry. And I said to him the other day, I said, So when I did the laundry up, we were using powdered soap, and now we use these little things. Says, do
Yeah.
you need 1 or 2? And he just looks at me. I'm like, you do it, honey.
You're like, how much should I put in here?
We have good husbands.
Yeah, we do. The best.
That's good.
Okay, so take this in your own time. Don't feel like you need to remember this is a video that you can pause or speed up at any time. So I'm just gonna keep moving on with my stars, but don't stress if we're going at a different pace. We all paint at different paces. I just wanna call attention to one thing, which is if you look at the right-hand side of our drawing, our star shapes get really, really wonky. But that's because if you think about something and you're looking at it flat, it's gonna be its shape, and then as a blanket kind of curves and it's coming back out at you, our shapes all of a sudden are foreshortened and turned on their side. So if we kept these stars like this perfect flat shape across the whole thing, then our quilt will just be flat, which is fine. That's how you see quilts sometimes. But this one, I really wanted to communicate the movement. And so we need to account for that angle shift and have our stars be pretty wonky. So when you get to that area and you're like, wait a second, what is happening over here? It's just the angle at which that we're seeing these pieces sewn on and it's coming out, okay?
Got it.
So,
I love these blooms on these two.
ooh, those are good. Yeah, I like that.
But he needs a little clearing up on his line.
Okay, so then for this section star, I'm gonna use a combination of my yellow and my sepia to kind of create like a gold color or an ochre, which is one of my favorite colors here. And again, I'm just gonna do the same thing, kind of just paint every other section using my round 6.
That's
Are we
good.
here or here?
Isn't that good? I'm like using that.
Okay. And I am going to paint over here because I can't do the left-handed thing over yet.
Okay.
Let's see, I have this guy, I can do him.
And then again, this kind of section is going in my shadowed area, so I'm going to grab a little bit of that extra sepia to darken that. And then when we do the bottom of our quilt here, we'll really play with shifting our hues to kind of match that value shift so it gets that dimensional feeling.
These are great colors.
Aren't they nice?
Yeah.
They kind of, so when I got married, my mom made me a wedding quilt and the colors on it were yellow, which is one of my favorite colors.
It's nice of her.
Yeah, it's huge. It is a huge quilt. It's like more than a king size quilt. It's a chunky quilt.
Chunky quilt. Chunky quilt.
I gave up making the wedding quilt.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so what I do is people who, you know, because when you're a quilter, you get invited to all the weddings and
Yeah.
you try to make their dreams come true.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you make a bed quilt, it's bedding.
Yeah.
And so I make a smaller quilt and give them a picnic basket with it.
Cute.
And so I've given them permission to eat on the ground, throw it on the ground and eat food on it.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
that quilt becomes their car quilt, which is where all their memories are. And I can do anything I want to. It can be any kind of quilt because it's the picnic quilt, right?
I love
Yes.
it.
And so that has really helped me because before it was like, all right, what are your colors? What size is your
Yeah,
bed? You know,
yeah.
you try to make dreams come true. But at the end of the day, they're not going to have that on their bed for 50 years. You know, they're going to have it on their bed for a year and they're going to have a different taste.
Don't worry, Mom. I will always have my.
Jenny's giving away all the secrets.
I know your mom, she wouldn't care.
No, she
That's a
wouldn't.
great idea.
Actually, my
It just eased
husband.
up a lot of stress for me.
My husband used to work with Jenny doing the videos and the tutorials, and so he used to film all of their quilt tutorials and edit them. And one day he made a quilt over there, and it is my favorite. We keep that in our living room actually because it's so comfy. He put, what is it, snuggle fabric? That really
Oh,
fuzzy
cuddle.
fabric
Cuddle
on the one
fabric.
side, so it's super soft, and then the other side is like galaxy stars. But he did a great job. I was really impressed.
I miss him every time I film. I miss him.
He's pretty great.
He is pretty great.
But my mom still calls him and talks to him about quilting and asks for tips. She's
very
like, I'm
cool.
having this issue. What's going on? And he's like, well, have you checked this?
That is fun.
It's cute.
No, he does have a lot of knowledge.
Okay, so I painted my yellow sections on this star and I'm gonna move to a different color. I'm gonna do a little bit of red and gold, like the yellow and the sepia, to get kind of like a brown orange color. Now again, try and see if your painting is dry enough. Mine's still pretty wet, but I'm feeling a little bit edgy and I'm just gonna like go for it anyway.
Wild, she's a wild child.
And you can also use that heated craft tool, Jenny, if you ever want to dry a section before you paint.
Are you thinking I'm a little impatient?
Never. I would never.
Never think that?
I would never think that about
No
you.
accusatory tones here.
And I'm lifting a little bit of color on this one. It got a little bit darker than I wanted it to. So whenever that happens, you can just put water down, take a little piece of paper towel and lift. And it will lift a little bit of color.
So many good tips. I've forgotten so much. It's interesting when you don't do something regularly, you do forget a lot.
Yeah. But then as you like paint, it kind of starts
It really
coming
does
back
come
to
back,
you.
yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, we have to do this. Oh yeah, I can just use a paper towel.
Oh yeah, you can just lift. No biggie. Now when I do the edges of these, I like to use the tip of my brush to kind of create a line and then just use the side of my brush to fill it in. So when I'm doing thinner lines, I hold my brush vertical up and down, and that's gonna do a thinner line. And then I kind of hold it more to the side, and that gives me a thicker brush stroke, which just is faster to fill in areas. So you can kind of adjust how you're holding your brush. So again, if I'm going along the edge here, I'm doing just...
There were quite a few lines I've noticed that I have forgotten to draw.
Oh,
Or
really?
that I missed, like I'm missing this. I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure that star doesn't go on forever, but it could.
And that totally happens. And when that happens, I just say eyeball it. I never
Yeah.
stress, because once you kind of untape your outline, you're on your own. You know what I mean? So just eyeball it, put it in where you think it would go.
If you're painting with a buddy and they didn't miss that line, use their reference photo.
Yeah, just be like,
Ah,
Right, that's what I'm doing. I'm using your reference photo.
Convenient.
Oh, that's probably the wrong angle. Doesn't match my other angle. We'll go down
all right.
further.
Actually, one of my favorite quilts that I have too is my mom made me, I was young. I probably was like 12 maybe, but she made me a t-shirt quilt.
Oh, nice.
And,
Cool.
but she put like extra batting in it, so it's thicker, so it has like a weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of was like a weighted quilt before I knew what a weighted blanket was.
Right.
And I love it so much. I think it has like football teams on it. I was very into sports when I was younger, but that's my favorite one. It's probably hard to have a favorite for you. I feel like you're just surrounded by
Well,
quilts.
they're favorites for different reasons. You know,
Oh,
like
yeah.
this is my 4th of July one I always hang, but they are favorites for different reasons. Because before I was a quilter, I was making quilts and I didn't know I was making quilts, if that makes any sense. I was just sewing squares together to make something.
Oh,
And I made a lot
interesting.
of denim jeans quilts because jeans were something I had quick, access to. Somebody was
Yeah.
always growing out of a pair and I would just cut them up and sew them together. And those are like weighted blankets.
Oh yeah,
You know,
because of the denim.
The denim is so heavy, and I would always find I would find myself wrapped up. I'd be like, Ron, just put one of those on top of the bed. And he's laying on top of the bed, and I'm like dressed in a sweatshirt. And
Keenan, do you have quilts?
I have one quilt that
Okay.
I can think of right now. My mother made it for me as well when I got my Eagle Scout Award.
Oh.
oh, I remember
Good for
helping
you.
with that.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Denny's like, I actually made that. You're welcome.
No, his mom's a pretty good sewer.
What does yours look like, Keenan? Does it have eagles on it?
So, sort of. So it has a pattern. It has the fleur de.
Come on, you're going to make your mother, you're going to make her really
Well,
sad
I always
because she
say
wants
it-
to be French.
I always say it wrong.
Fleur de lis.
Fleur de lis, thank you. I was going to say fleur de line because Florida line, I think. I don't know. But it has the fleur de lis pattern that was sewn into the fabric.
The
And then
quilting
the
pattern.
actual fabric itself was like a Boy Scout fabric.
It's a Boy Scout line. So we came out with a
Oh.
line right about the same time.
Yeah.
And I remember we were just so excited because it was
Great timing.
great
That's
timing.
perfect timing.
Yeah, it has various merit badges on it that I did not earn, but also various merit badges that I did earn because I had to earn 20. I think I had to earn a total of 27 to
Wow.
qualify.
At least.
Yeah, I think I completed 48 merit badges, but I only received 29.
Because why?
Paperwork issues,
Moving.
moving a lot. different-
Oh, did you
different
dip?
units.
I just blotted with my arm, if you will.
Yeah, that happens. Or I'll get some little friends that I leave marks on I'll get it on my hand and then I place my hand. I'm like,
Or you're out to dinner and you do this and you go, oh, why is this all yellow? Oh, never mind. I'll look down and I just have threads.
yeah.
And I'm like, why didn't somebody say just roll? You need to roll yourself off with the lint roller. But no, they let me go out with all my threads. But then all the other quilters recognize me and we flock together as a people. Gosh, this feels good to do.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me.
I'm so glad you were able to come. I love just having a moment. I mean, I feel like also when you're with someone painting, it's a little bit easier to talk and not be so into your painting that you're kind of stressing out.
Right.
So just like low-key painting. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, my preferred type of painting is by myself. It's for me. I don't even really like to paint with my kids, if I'm being honest with you. Like, it is me time.
No, me neither.
But when you're sometimes once in a while just to like have a minute to be with a friend and to just like let it go and let it be quiet sometimes, or learn some things, it's just nice. It's just a nice little moment.
It really is a nice moment. But I think creatives on a whole tend to be a little bit solitary because so much happens in our brain when we're by ourselves. And so there's a lot of that. And people will always, they always apologize when I come out and talk to me. And honestly, the people is my favorite part of what I do. But I still, my space is very private to me. I don't, and nobody else goes in there. Well, Natalie and Misty, but they're rarely there, to be honest. They both, they're both they like to be at home. Misty still has little kids. And
Yeah.
I call them cave dwellers. Not the kids. But they just like to be, they like their own space and that sort of thing. And so I have really gotten used to having my own space in my own studio, and I just really like it. If I could do it at home, I would do it at home, but I can't do it at home.
I have to have a separate workspace from my house.
I tried to make over the 2 bedrooms upstairs like 3 times. Literally had Ron move everything out, painted it, put stuff on the walls, did it. Then I would drag all my stuff down to the dining room table. I have to sew
really?
at the dining room table because when you're a mother, you're like a prison guard and you have to have your back to the wall and you have to know what's going on all around you. And I literally couldn't just paint upstairs in a room with a wall. So it has to feel like a job to me. So I have a very nice studio in
You do have a
an
beautiful
old
studio.
library.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I love that it's mine.
Yeah, that is a great space.
It's such good light, and I need to get a new desk. I have one of those desks that is kind of it has the laminate over it. I've had it for like 15 years, and the laminate is starting to peel up, and I'm like, well, this isn't good.
Maybe it's time.
Upgrade.
So I found a spot where I forgot a line right here, so I'm just going to sketch that in right here.
Oh, wait.
Right there.
Oh, I didn't know sketching was a thing. I thought we had to just like fake it with our paintbrush.
You can
I did.
draw
I
it in
faked it. I
first,
faked it
or
with
you
my
can
paintbrush.
do your paintbrush,
Yeah,
whatever's
I did.
easier for you. So I am right-handed, Jenny's left-handed, and I unfortunately have a tendency to paint my right-hand side first, which is a bummer because then when I try and paint my left-hand side, my hand is going in the paint. So in the future for you guys, if it's helpful for you, if you notice that your wrist keeps going into paint, whatever side you're painting with, just try and start on the opposite side so then you can just work your way across. But I am not a good guide on that because I always forget and I always start on my right-hand side.
Huh. It's like your multiple cups of water,
Oh, yeah.
but you always use one of them.
You mean you need to tread real lightly here, Kim.
You better watch yourself.
You better watch yourself.
Well, I just was trying so hard to teach people the correct way of having different cups of water for their different colors so then they wouldn't mix muddy water that would then get in their paints. But when I have multiple jars of water in front of me, I just use whatever's closest, and so they all turn muddy. And I stopped doing that years ago because I realized I'm like, you know what, that's just not the way I do it.
And that really is a personal thing. You know, everybody has a different way. Like I had my paintbrush sitting in here, and I remembered that Sarah doesn't like to leave the paintbrushes sitting in there. And I'm like, I actually do leave my paintbrushes in the water glass because it reminds me not to drink it. You know, 'cause I have made that mistake a few times.
We should get like a shirt that says like honorary, like something celebrating when you actually accidentally drink your paint water. Everybody does it. It should be like this rite of passage.
Almost like an invite to Hogwarts.
Yes.
You just like randomly get a shirt in the mail. Like, we know you did it.
We know that you did
So,
it. You've been
well-
painting with us 6 months. You for sure have accidentally drinking paint water.
That was so funny.
Now I'm kind of switching up my colors on this. You know, I have like the yellow, browns, orange. I have pink and red. This one I'm doing yellow and red. This one I'm doing more brown. So again, just make the decisions of the colors that you want to use. There's no wrong answers here. Just remember on the areas, especially, so here I'm doing the star that's kind of really coming into that shadow and that fold. So I want to make sure that this section is pretty dark. And you can always use, we kind of mix that like neutral for our shadow. You can always use that color if you want to do a little mix in of that. That will automatically turn that section a darker value.
My problem is I tend to keep my value going. I mean, you know, it's like all dark.
Well,
See this one, we're doing some brown. on
I
this.
think we have a tendency to kind of like work areas over and over again. And that is kind of when your values kind of even out. It's kind of tricky just to leave a spot.
I love seeing those shadows you put in first starting to come into play.
Yeah, kind of start to activate this space and you kind of get that.
Yeah.
Now, when I originally painted this project, my first layer of shadow wasn't dark enough. So after I painted my stars, you can see my shadow, but not as maybe intense as I wanted it to be seen. So I added another layer of shadow after I did my stars, which was a little bit tricky because at that point you have to avoid the star section. So just know that that is an option for you if you found that your shadows, that first kind of step, ran too light in value that now they're not showing up. Just paint your stars, let it dry, and then do another layer on your shadows, but just try and work around the stars so those colors don't bleed. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Jenny. Okay, and then this one I didn't finish because I wanted that to dry. So now that it's pretty dry, I'm gonna go back in. Let's do more yellow. If you need more of a color, let me know because now our butcher palette is kind of turning into
It's a little busy.
a little crazy, a little muddy mess going on.
Yeah.
pretty good. How are you doing over here?
I think I'm doing all right.
This is looking good.
I'm doing.
Yeah, you're doing it.
I had painted the wrong side here. I didn't go every other one.
Oh, yeah.
Skipped and made a fabric choice.
Fabric choice.
My fabric choice needed to change a little bit right there so that I would have good contrast. It's important to have good contrast in your quilts.
Is that what you look for in quilt when you're kind of piecing patterns together? Is it about
You do,
contrast?
because everything that has, if it all has the same value, it just all blends together.
Yep.
And so you look for things that stand out and are contrasted to. And I think as a painter, you naturally do that. That is not a natural thing for me. So I love that there are designers that put packs of fabric together for me to sew with, because I'm a matcher. I don't see contrast well. And so I'll get a blue floral, and then I'll pick, colors from that print. But, when you buy a pack of pre-cuts, which are just a package of 10-inch squares that are all from the same line of fabric, you'll have geometrics and florals and solids and all these different things that all go and work there, and a designer has put those together. And so I feel like it's a little present for me when they do that, because that's just not, my gift is in shortcuts. I see quick ways to do things.
Yeah.
And it's quick and it's easy, and that's what I do. But when I do, so for me, I use the pre-cuts all the time. They're just they're just like a little gift for me.
Yeah, because then you know that
I know it's
usually
gonna work.
they'll work together.
In the beginning, I would pick out the ones I thought were ugly and not use them, and my quilts were back to boring again.
Really?
Yeah, and Sarah's like, Mom, you got to use all those. And I'm like, are you sure? It was so interesting.
Well, in general, for painting and art, the value of having contrast, the good thing about having different values contrasting is that is essentially what creates form or three-dimensionality. So if you think about the shape of a circle, it's just a shape and it's flat, and it's just that white thing in between in the circle, so it's just like flat. But once you add value inside of that circle that shifts from dark to light, that's actually where you get the feeling of the roundness and the form of the shape. The shapes stay the same, they're both circle, but one of them feels like a sphere just because of that value and that transition in value and that contrast.
Yeah, that actually helped me so much in my fabric choices, knowing why that mattered. Mm-hmm. You're helping the whole creative world, Sarah.
And what's fun about that is once you understand that different values is essentially what creates the illusion of form, you can do that in many different ways. So people who do three-dimensional sculpture, or those artists that take these materials that aren't necessarily standard materials, and they kind of form something together and it makes a face. Mm-hmm. But it's just because, on the eye part, underneath the eye, it's a darker value. On the nostril, they're using darker values of whatever that shape is, whether it's pieces of pom-poms or, you know what I mean? Twigs or glass or whatever. It's all just values.
And they make quilts out of just all squares. They're pixelated. they call them pixelated quilts, and they're just all hundreds of little squares. But when you step back, it makes a face.
Yep.
Yes.
Or something. And I'm just always like, that's so cool.
It's just all values. If you can kind of pay attention to values, then you can start picking up on those kinds of things. And it really helps.
This is a great project too, because it's like a consistent pattern that you can really get better at, even with the foreshortening that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. It's a great one.
Well, thanks, Keenan.
Yeah, good call, Sarah.
Well, and I guess thank you, Jenny, because you originally made the quilt that I used as
There we go.
Yeah.
you said this for the outline.
Full circle.
Full circle here.
I have a little plaid going on up here.
Oh, that's cute.
Oh.
Yep. Don't know how it's going to work out in the end, but
It's going to work out great.
Seems like it's going to be fun.
I already feel good about it.
There you go.
I like it.
Okay, so I'm at a place where I feel pretty good about my large stars. I'm not going to start on my small stars yet because I want to address the edge of this quilt here.
What are you calling the small stars?
These.
Those shoe fly blocks?
Oh, is that what they
That's
are?
a shoe fly
That's
block.
a shoe fly block. And, well, is this the edge?
No, it's called a border.
Oh, okay. Oh, great.
And then the
I
little
know
tiny
that
edge,
word.
the little tiny edge on the bottom, that's called a binding.
Wonderful. So we're going to do the border and the binding, and you guys can choose whatever colors you want. I'm going to stick with
Or if you're
kind of
not a
more-
quilter, the edge.
The edge. We're going to paint the edge of our quilt. So if you look at our reference photo here, you can see that on the areas where it's not in the shadowed area, we have a nice bright yellow, and then it transitions to a darker yellow on both of these quilts. And that is, again, we're trying to create that form and that line of movement. Now I did the same thing on the smaller edge. What is this called?
Binding.
A binding, but I used an orange color instead of the yellow color. But again, we're following that same value rule where it just starts as a light value and then it moves to a darker value, okay? So I'm gonna make sure I have some nice bright yellow. So I kind of wiped off a section on my palette to put some more fresh yellow down.
Which is very smart. I watched you do it and I was like, oh, light bulb moment. Light bulb moment. Usually I go wash my whole thing off and I'm like,
just take a paper towel, wipe off a section.
It's an advanced technique.
And actually I'm gonna move to my, my 12 for this.
I'm going to join you. I don't know if I've ever used a 12.
I like how big it is. It's just quick.
Nice and big.
So I'm going to go ahead and start with this kind of bright yellow.
Okay.
And then as I make my way to that corner, kind of where it folds, I'm going to keep adding a little bit of orange and darker value here. So it kind of just transitions. So the darkest value is going to be right on this edge. And then as it moves out, it's going to lighten up. Now I can see here, I kind of have a gray area here, which I don't think transitioned very well. So I'm just going to smooth that out. And then this feels kind of like a really hard edge. So you see that? You see there's a pretty strong line between those values. So I'm just going to grab some more yellow and kind of lift some color out here to make that transition nice and smooth. So I'm kind of just working the area back and forth. There we go.
Is mine dark enough?
You know what, we're kind of a little bit lucky is we can see our overhead camera. That's how we can kind of step away from it and see if it's doing its good. I would do one more layer,
okay,
darker, like mix a little bit of green in there to get that kind of opposite value. Okay, it's showing up, maybe a little bit more. Nope, too much. There we go. That.
You're so brave.
and then just kind
push
of,
it out?
Yep, just kind of blend it out.
Did that make a big difference, Keenan?
Yeah.
Oh, it sure does.
Yep.
Look how cool.
Yep.
I didn't realize we could see ourselves. I just knew there were more people painting in the room. No, I'm just kidding. I really didn't. I just didn't think to look at it.
Well, I actually use that as a way to like get a figure on my painting because when I'm this close to it, I can't actually see it.
Right.
And so being able to see this angle, which is the overhead, which is what you guys can see, super helpful because I'm like, oh no, it's okay.
Helpful.
We're good. We're good. I can see what I need to see.
So then we're starting over here with more yellow.
Yeah, I'm going to get more fresh yellow.
Okay.
And just repeat that same thing. We're going to start off with this nice bright yellow and then transition to a darker value.
This is the easiest, flattest border I've ever put on.
Yeah, is it easier to paint a quilt or sew a quilt? I don't know the answer to that.
I think there are easier parts in both, but putting borders on it's something I've done so long that I can do it without even measuring. But a lot of times people will, they get really rumply, and it's because they put their border on the bottom of they put the border next to the sewing machine, and the feed dogs take in more fabric, and so it'll take in more border fabric, and then you're left with this border that's all rumply. And I'm always like, put your border on the top, put your border on the top.
Put your border on the top.
Yeah, so your quilt goes next to the feed dogs on the machine, and your fabric, your border piece goes on the top, always.
Feed dogs, all of these new terms and words
right?
I'm learning.
A whole new world.
And now if you guys can, The next step as you pay attention to your values is noticing how the values relate to each other. So if we're looking at this section, I actually want this value to be darker than this value over here. And the reason why is this area is farther away because it's actually folding into the quilt, and this area is closest to us and not as intense of a fold. Does that make sense? So the more intense the fold is, or sharper, or like that fold is really folded, your values will have a darker look. And then if it's a soft fold, like a curve, your values will be lighter than the tight fold. Does that make sense?
Maybe more shallow and deep.
Yes, thank you. So if your fold is deep, you want to make sure your values are nice and dark. If your fold is shallow, then it's going to be a softer value.
That doesn't look too bad.
No, it doesn't.
Two little dots right there.
And you can always, after you put in, like, I'm recognizing that I need to do just a little more section of value on this one to help that transition. There we go. That feels good. Okay, we're going to let that dry before we do our
Shoe flies.
We're going to do our shoe flies right now. That's what we're going to do. So, so I actually used just this pine green, and I just added water to it because this pine green is actually a really kind of cool green.
Yeah, it's a minty color.
Yeah. And so when you add water to it, it's kind of like this really pretty mint green. So I'm just going to take my round 6. I'm going to grab some of this pine green, add some water to it. And it has like almost a turquoisey color to it too. Is that pretty? Mm-hmm. So then I'm just going to take that and put that on my shoe fly square.
The shoe fly.
Did I say it right?
Bother me. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh wait, I'm going to start over here because my left.
Oh, yep. Jenny, thank you for reminding me. I'm going to start on my left-hand side.
I'm going to start on my right-hand side.
There we go.
For I am left-handed.
Yeah, and I thought that the blue actually complemented, or like this blue-green minty color complemented how warm this
It's
quilt
so
was.
gorgeous.
It's just a
It's
little
so gorgeous.
pop of bright to play with. And so think about that too. If you feel like your painting is really warm colors, is there a little place where you do a pop of cool? A pop of cool.
Papa Cool.
That was my band name in high school.
Pop of cool.
Cool.
It's my band name now.
And then we're just painting these and then we'll go back and make them darker or lighter later?
You just try and match the values as you're going through those kind of shadowed areas. But usually I'm just going to do one little paint layer on them.
Oh, because you have like one half of this like is a little lighter.
Yeah, so just pay attention to where it's falling on that crease, and the areas where it's falling on the crease do a little bit of a darker value.
I'm pretty sure, I don't know my crease. My crease is gone.
Did your crease disappear?
I think so.
We might have to do another layer. And I can show you guys how to do that actually. I will show you guys how to add another layer even after we added all of this.
Absolutely. If you guys need any help with the wrong stuff, I am there for you.
So if you want to make sure that it's a lighter value, all you have to do, like this one right here, it's going right on that edge that's kind of popping out. So this would be kind of like my lightest value out of all these.
Shoe flies.
Shoe fly, I want to say horseshoe for some reason, shoe fly. So just add more water to get that lighter value.
Horseshoe.
I don't know why. Shoe fly. Shoe fly, don't bother me.
I'm just glad we aren't going to be tested on the names and the terms because none of us would do very well.
I would fail.
My worst is acronyms.
Yeah.
Oh.
I literally don't get acronyms. I try to make a word out of them, you know, and it's just, you know, people be like, oh, you know, like they have all acronyms now for everything. It's the LOL
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like lots of love, you know.
Yes.
Just like, what could it mean?
I know when I'm getting a little bit older, I have to look up acronyms when I see people using
Gosh,
them. Where I'm
when
like,
that's when
what
you
does
know
this
you're
mean?
old. That's when you know you're old.
What does this mean? Okay.
Like fire. This is really fire.
Yes. I know what that means. That's good.
Or
Yeah,
lit.
that's great.
Or lit.
Lit.
I just learned that. But then there's all kinds of things say that don't mean what they used to mean.
And you're like, oh.
I'm like, oh, sorry. Sorry, grandchildren, didn't know. I'd be like, Jared, is this bussin'? And he's just like, Grandma, just don't.
Sorry, I mixed your green.
That's all right.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and mix another neutral again. So I put in some pine green. I'm gonna grab some red. And this is us kind of going back to the shadowed areas to see if we can do another layer to kind of darken our creases. Now, this is where I need you guys to look at your paintings and see if you need this, because your painting is gonna look different from
Oh,
mine.
I can see my crease better in there than
Yeah.
I can right here in front of me.
Yeah, so this is where I can't see your guys' painting and it should be different from ours. So kind of take a look at it and say, you know what, my crease has disappeared. Step away from it. That's what's helpful. Or say, yeah, I don't really. So, okay, so this is how you do it. So we've already painted our section. So I'm gonna kind of use what we already painted as our guide. And I'm just gonna do another layer with my 12. But it's a little bit trickier because I got to work around my stars. So I just am going to do kind of follow that same shape. So by doing another layer just right on top of it, we're just going to darken our values. But again, I'm trying to avoid my stars. So you see how I'm kind of working around it?
This feels very dangerous to me.
It's definitely a little bit of an edgy move. So if you're not...
I am edgy.
Nice.
Just want you to know that right at this moment, feeling real edgy.
I'm feeling edgy too, so I'm just gonna go for it. I'm using this neutral, if
Oh,
that's
okay.
helpful. It's just a little guy.
That is helpful.
And
I've now diluted your neutral
that's all right.
into something that doesn't know what it is anymore.
I can always mix more.
And then I don't have anything left on my brush.
So just kind of following the shape, avoiding our stars. And if that means that you're you gotta make it a little bit bigger, that's fine. To make that transition smooth, that's not a big deal. So this one, I'm gonna have to do that a little bit on this side. Kind of soften that. So you see how it's a little
And do
bit...
you still want this hard line? See my hard line right there? Do you still want that?
Oh no, soften that out with
Soften
some
it out.
water.
Soften out. Get out of there.
Get out of there.
Soften up, soften up.
Transition out. And again, your painting might not need this, so kind of just look at what's going on with yours. And sometimes I'll get these kind of blooms, and when that happens, I can take my 1-inch wash that's dry, and I can just try and work the area back and forth to smooth it out.
To get rid of those?
Yeah, to kind of just...
Okay.
I love using wash brushes as a blending tool. A dry wash brush is great to blend out some lines. So it just kind of softens them. And I'm going to do the same thing over here kind of on this edge. Grab a little bit more red.
My gosh, this looks like a folded quilt.
Doesn't it look like a folded quilt? And just blend out.
I just realized I didn't paint a whole star up here, so I better get back to it. Get back to it, Jenny.
I forgot a little chunk too, but that's okay. I'm going to do my shadow first and then I'll paint over it. And again, the same thing, our value needs to be a little bit darker on this fold than on the right hand side because that fold is, what's the
Excuse
word?
me.
Deep?
Deep.
Deep.
Depth.
It's a deep fold. There we go. Look at that. It's so fun when you step back and you're just like, it popped out. It popped, you know?
Everyone just needs a little overhead camera in their life.
That's it.
That would be pretty convenient for all projects.
Yeah, it would. Okay.
Okay.
Looking pretty darn good. Okay, so again, we're gonna follow that same value rule. It's gonna start out a lighter value and then it's gonna move to a darker value on both of these. So you can use whatever color. I'm gonna grab this kind of orangey color here.
You're doing the liner.
And I switched to my round 2 because this is a nice kind of small area. And again, kind of where that transitions, I'm just going to kind of blend it back and forth to make that transition smooth.
Nice transition.
Thank you. Now this area doesn't totally hit the shadowed fully. So you see how kind of my shadow, on my reference photo, my shadow was a little bit more moved over, so it kind of ran into it. This one, it doesn't really. So you guys can decide if you want to do a little bit of a value change or not. And if you want to show that that curve is kind of coming up around, you can do, if you're feeling comfortable, a slight hint of a dark value to kind of give the feeling of it coming around something. Feels good. And I think I just need to paint this section up here.
I think I need to paint my this one a little. It needs to be something else. Something needs to happen here.
Something needs to happen over there?
Yeah, it needs to be something
I'm gonna do
darker or
red.
brighter or something. These are very, oops, there's too much paint on there. Now we're just gonna try and use this for the next 2 hours. Sometimes don't you feel like that? Like, ooh, that was a lot of paint.
Yep.
Well, that's better. Better already.
And then while you're waiting, I'm gonna wait for that to dry. And now we can kind of move on to our very last step here, which is putting in our details or putting in the fabric pattern on these different sections. So you could have been doing that this whole time, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you haven't done it this whole time, you can add it now. Or if you're just like, no, these are just solid sections, you can do that too.
That is a great, quilt is a solids.
Yeah. I'm gonna do little, I like suns on this one.
Wait, what are you doing? Oh, cute.
Maybe a little bright.
Is herringbone a pattern name?
It is a herringbone is a quilt pattern.
Yeah.
Easily made with 2 half square triangles.
Oh.
People have been doing things hard for way too long. Like, if you want an easy way to do that, I got it. I got you.
It's bussin'.
It's lit. It's fire. It's fire.
Even still, I'm like, what?
I don't know. Jenny just taught me that word. So I
I have grandchildren,
don't know.
lots of them, and they teach me those words, and then make fun of me when I use them. That's all right. I don't mind. I really don't mind.
Are we okay?
Yeah, we're great.
Okay.
I feel like most of my stars are brown. My high school colors are brown.
Oh, really?
No, they're not. It's
Oh.
Purple and Gold.
Oh,
But that's
okay.
a song. That's a song. It was like, it's about this really boring town. Even the high school colors are brown. And I just think it's a hilarious song.
That
Oh,
is
I have
funny
to
because
put
I was
some-
gonna say, I'm like, I've never heard of a high school colors being brown.
Right? No, it's a song. It's an old country song.
And then I like that. I'm gonna do those lines. And sometimes in our head, because we think of patterns and we think of like really strong prints, we think that they have to be really obvious on our fabric, but that's not always the case. So it's okay if it's just a hint of a pattern, hint of a line, hint of a shape. We don't have to get too lost.
Well, because like the mind makes the difference, right?
Yep.
The brain fixes.
The brain makes, I mean, we've talked about it before. Brains love to make patterns for us. And sometimes that hurts us when we're trying to recreate something because our brain is telling us something that's not true. Like our eyes are actually seeing something different. But in this case, our brain is actually doing a lot of the work for us by filling in these patterns or these lines or these shapes. So it's really just hints. Oh, I think I actually did stripies next to each other. Well, that's okay. I'll do suns over here. I'm just gonna keep going.
I'm the fan of the polka dot.
Yeah, me too. It's cute. I'm gonna do little polka dots on my square section, or my like pink section. Little red. I need some red. And this one I'm just using a 2. You okay?
That was my fault. I moved my elbow.
Shame on you.
I apologize.
Can you please be professional? That's it. You're not getting paid again.
I knew it. Any excuse.
And if you want to do like, maybe on some of these you do little like swirlies so they kind of look like flowers. Boop, 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 boop. Actually, I just remembered this. I started watercolor because I was an art major, but I kind of focused more on oils. And but I needed a way to paint at home to let out some creativity. But I had a little toddler, and oil paints do not mix well with children because there's a lot of like chemicals and things like that that go into them. And my mother-in-law made this baby blanket for me that was so beautiful. I loved it. It was just this red floral.
She is also a very good quilter.
Yes, and it was just gorgeous. And I thought, I wonder if I could watercolor that. So one of my very first watercolors, I took that fabric, that floral fabric, and I set it down and I took some watercolor paints like my first time, and I just recreated or tried to recreate that fabric. And from there, I kind of just kept going with watercolors. I fell in love.
So I have to tell you, I got the coolest letter today. It was from a girl named Corinne Wells, and I taught her how to quilt. And she sent me this letter, and she said that she lived on the East Coast, and she had 2 little babies, and she's trying hard to raise them, and her husband worked late, and so she took up quilting and started quilting. And she said, and then she got really interested in the industry, and so she wanted to create her own fabric. So she went and watched Let's Make Art and started to watercolor her own fabric. And so now I'm doing a tutorial with her quilt pattern. She started designing patterns and fabric with her quilt pattern and her fabric.
That is amazing.
Isn't that not the coolest thing?
You have to send
Isn't
me
that-
what her fabric looks like.
It's called Elegance.
Elegance.
It's just really beautiful. It's not out yet. It won't be out for a few months. But I said, well, write your story down and tell me. And I'm just like, I have to use your fabric. This is the coolest story. And then it combined both of our worlds here
Yeah.
in Hamilton. I just like, oh, this
I
is
love
the coolest.
that.
Isn't that so cool?
That's amazing.
Corinne Wells is her name.
Corinne Wells. Congratulations, Corinne.
And now she's designing fabric.
That's a dream.
Wait,
of
so I
mine.
want to ask you about this line right here.
Yeah.
Like it feels like too much, but I can't seem to get it out either.
Okay, so whenever that happens, if you have like a hard edge bloom right here, what I like, Jenny,
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
what I like to do is I'll take a clean brush and I'll rinse it with just water. And I'll take my water and I'm just gonna work this area back and forth. Just to try and blend out that hard edge.
It was a bloom because originally I thought it was pretty dang, I thought my edge was pretty good. And then I looked down and I went, oh, and it's dry, of course.
And so trying to soften that. And then I'm gonna take my 1-inch brush and just kind of like smooth it out. And it won't erase it completely, but it
But
will
it's better.
soften it.
Yeah.
It will soften
So
it.
on my brown flowers also, do you think I need to go in with a really darker color and like make them really line them out?
Yeah, if you want your pattern, or like the edges or the pattern.
The edges.
Yeah, if you want to clean up the edge, what you can do is go in with your 2. And just like if I wanted to clean up some edges here, I can just go in and sharpen them up.
Okay.
But it takes it really is tricky getting
It's
those
details.
like,
It's the last step.
yeah, getting those straight lines. Another thing that you can do if you get a hard edge like that, you try and lighten it and it's just still not going, is you can do another layer of color on top of it to, again, we're trying to like hide it or mask it. So if I just kind of work that over. Sorry, Jenny, I just started painting on yours without asking.
I love it. You are fine. You don't have to apologize to me.
Okay.
I'll take all the help I can get.
So then if we look at the overhead, it's softer. You
It
know?
is,
So
yeah.
it's just kind of...
Oh, and my colors don't look too bad from over there.
No.
But this one kind of looks like a long hot dog, so I'm going to kind of fill this in.
There's nothing wrong with long hot dogs.
I don't know. It just doesn't look right.
I need to sharpen this edge. So yeah, last step, just these finishing details. Patterns, play, tightening up, sharpening, adjusting values, whatever you need to do.
My favorite part about this is how accomplished you feel.
Yeah.
You know, you just look at it and you're just like, oh my gosh, I did this.
And I also want to say that sometimes what we tend to do, especially as beginners, is we tend to make up our mind about something before it's done. And so I always say, give your paintings a chance to be something before you decide that you don't like it or not. And sometimes that means walking away from it and letting it
Wait till the morning.
wait till the morning.
Yeah.
We call it the watercolor fairies. The fairies come and make our painting, fix our painting for us, but really we just were able to step away for a minute and could look at it with fresh eyes, which is huge.
Well, not only that, don't expect to be good at the very first time or decide you don't like something when you haven't put adequate time to develop that skill.
Mm-hmm.
It always makes me think of when you first take a job and you walk into a building, you think, I am never going to be able to find everything. You know, that feeling is so overwhelming. And then within a week, you know where everything is and you're good to go. And I always think about that when I start something new. It's like, oh, it's just like the building. You think we're done?
I think I'm done.
I think I'm pretty done too.
I feel pretty good about it. Look at that. Look at these quilts we
I can
painted.
see my shadow.
Yeah. And isn't that
So
funny?
nice.
Just a shift in value.
Yeah.
All it needs to create that movement of folded.
It's super cool.
Well,
I love doing this with you.
I'm so glad you were able to come and paint with us. We really enjoyed it. And I hope you guys had a great time really just hanging out with us, painting with us, learning something new. If you're on Instagram, we would love to see your work. You can tag us at Let's Go Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art Watercolor.
All the hashtags.
All the hashtags. If you're on Facebook, you can join our watercolor community. That's called Let's Make Art Watercolor. And if you need any of these supplies, you can find them at letsmakeart.com. And if you actually want to learn how to quilt, you can go to Missouri Star Quilt Company.
Yes, you can.
You can sew with Jenny. So thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you later.
Bye.